The Dawnbreakers, Nabil's narrative, recorded for the handicapped, Tape 2. Certain of the Seyyid's disciples, despite the testimonies of their master, believed him to be the promised one, for in him they recognized the signs to which he was alluding. Among them was a certain Mullah Midi-i-Kui, who went so far as to make public this belief. Whereupon the Seyyid was sore displeased, and would have cast him out from the company of his chosen followers, had he not begged forgiveness and expressed his repentance for his action. Sheikh Hassan-i Zunuzi himself informed me that he too entertained such doubts, that he prayed to God that if his supposition was well-founded, he should be confirmed in his belief, and if not, that he should be delivered from such idle fancy. I was so perturbed, he once related to me, that for days I could neither eat nor sleep. My days were spent in the service of Sayyid Kazim, to whom I was greatly attached. One day at the hour of dawn, I was suddenly awakened by Mullah Noruz, one of his intimate attendants, who in great excitement bade me arise and follow him. We went to the house of Sayyid Kazim, where we found him fully dressed, wearing his abba, and ready to leave his home. He asked me to accompany him. "A highly esteemed and distinguished person," he said, "has arrived. I feel it incumbent upon both of us to visit him." The morning light had just broken when I found myself walking with him through the streets of Kabila. We soon reached a house, at the door of which stood a youth, as if expectant to receive us. He wore a green turban, and his countenance revealed an expression of humility and kindliness which I can never describe. He quietly approached us, extended his arms towards Sayyid Kazim, and lovingly embraced him. His affability and loving kindness singularly contrasted with the sense of profound reverence that characterized the attitude of Sayyid Kazim towards him. Speechless and with bowed head, he received the many expressions of affection and esteem with which that youth greeted him. We were soon led by him to the upper floor of that house, and entered a chamber bedecked with flowers and redolent of the loveliest perfume. He bade us be seated. We knew not, however, what seats we actually occupied, so overpowering was the sense of delight which seized us. We observed a silver cup, which had been placed in the center of the room, which our youthful host, soon after we were seated, filled to overflowing, and handed to Sayyid Kazim, saying, "A drink of a pure beverage shall their Lord give them." Quran 76:21. Sayyid Kazim held the cup with both hands and quaffed it. A feeling of reverent joy filled his being, a feeling which he could not suppress. I too was presented with a cupful of that beverage, though no words were addressed to me. All that was spoken at that memorable gathering was the above-mentioned verse of the Koran. Soon after, the host arose from his seat and, accompanying us to the threshold of the house, bade us farewell. I was mute with wonder, and knew not how to express the cordiality of his welcome, the dignity of his bearing, the charm of that face, and the delicious fragrance of that beverage. How great was my amazement when I saw my teacher quaff without the least hesitation that holy draught from a silver cup, the use of which, according to the precepts of Islam, is forbidden to the faithful. I could not explain the motive which could have induced the Seyyid to manifest such profound reverence in the presence of that youth, a reverence which even the sight of the shrine of the Sayyidu Shuhada had failed to excite. 3 days later, I saw that same youth arrive and take his seat in the midst of the company of the assembled disciples of Sayyid Kazim. He sat close to the threshold, and with the same modesty and dignity of bearing, listened to the discourse of the Seyyid. As soon as his eyes fell upon that youth, the Seyyid discontinued his address and held his peace. Whereupon one of his disciples begged him to resume the argument which he had left unfinished. "What more shall I say?" replied Sayyid Kazim, as he turned his face toward the Bab. "Lo, the truth is more manifest than the ray of light that has fallen upon that lamp." I immediately observed that the ray to which the Seyyid referred had fallen upon the lap of that same youth whom we had recently visited. "Why is it," that questioner inquired, "that you neither reveal his name nor identify his person?" To this the Seyyid replied by pointing with his finger to his own throat, implying that were he to divulge his name, they both would be put to death instantly. This added still further to my perplexity. I had already heard my teacher observe that so great is the perversity of this generation, that were he to point with his finger to the promised one and say, "He indeed is the beloved, the desire of your hearts and mine," they would still fail to recognize and acknowledge him. I saw the Seyyid actually point out with his finger the ray of light that had fallen on that lap, and yet none among those who were present seemed to apprehend its meaning. I, for my part, was convinced that the Seyyid himself could never be the promised one, but that a mystery inscrutable to us all lay concealed in that strange and attractive youth. Several times I ventured to approach Seyyid Kazim and seek from him an elucidation of this mystery. Every time I approached him, I was overcome by a sense of awe which his personality so powerfully inspired. Many a time I heard him remark, "O Sheikh Hassan, rejoice that your name is Hassan, praiseworthy. Hassan, your beginning, and Hassan, your end. You have been privileged to attain to the day of Sheikh Ahmad. You have been closely associated with me, and in the days to come yours shall be the inestimable joy of beholding what eye hath not seen, ear heard not, nor any heart conceived." I often felt the urge to seek alone the presence of that Hashemite youth and to endeavor to fathom his mystery. I watched him several times as he stood in an attitude of prayer at the doorway of the shrine of the Imam Hussein. So wrapped was he in his devotions that he seemed utterly oblivious of those around him. Tears ring from his eyes, and from his lips fell words of glorification and praise of such power and beauty as even the noblest passages of our sacred scriptures could not hope to surpass. The words, "O God, my beloved, my heart's desire," were uttered with a frequency and ardor that those of the visiting pilgrims who were near enough to hear him instinctively interrupted the course of their devotions and marveled at the evidences of piety and veneration which that youthful countenance evinced. Like him, they were moved to tears, and from him they learned the lesson of true adoration. Having completed his prayers, that youth, without crossing the threshold of the shrine and without attempting to address any words to those around him, would quietly return to his home. I felt the impulse to address him, but every time I ventured an approach, a force that I could neither explain nor resist detained me. My inquiries about him elicited the information that he was a resident of Shiraz, that he was a merchant by profession, and did not belong to any of the ecclesiastical orders. I was, moreover, informed that he, and also his uncles and relatives, were among the lovers and admirers of Sheikh Ahmad and Seyyid Kazim. Soon after, I learned that he had departed for Najaf on his way to Shiraz. That youth had set my heart aflame. The memory of that vision haunted me. My soul was wedded to his till the day when the call of a youth from Shiraz, proclaiming himself to be the Bab, reached my ears. The thought instantly flashed through my mind that such a person could be none other than that self-same youth whom I had seen in Karbila, the youth of my heart's desire. When later on I journeyed from Karbila to Shiraz, I found that he had set out on a pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. I met him on his return, and endeavored, despite the many obstacles in my way, to remain in close association with him. When subsequently he was incarcerated in the fortress of Maku in the province of Azerbaijan, I was engaged in transcribing the verses which he dictated to his amanuensis. Every night, for a period of 9 months, during which he was a prisoner in that fort, he revealed, after he had offered his evening prayer, a commentary on a juz of the Quran. A juz is 1/30th of the Quran. At the end of each month, the commentary on the whole of that sacred book was thus completed. During his incarceration in Maku, 9 commentaries on the whole of the Quran had been revealed by him. The texts of these commentaries were entrusted in Tabriz to the keeping of a certain Syed Ibrahim-i Khalil, who was instructed to conceal them until the time for their publication might arrive. Their fate is unknown until now. In connection with one of these commentaries, the Bab one day asked me, "Which do you prefer, this commentary which I have revealed, or the Ahsanul Qisas, my previous commentary on the Surah of Joseph? Which of the two is superior in your estimation?" "To me," I replied, "the Ahsanul Qisas seems to be endowed with greater power and charm." He smiled at my observation and said, "You are as yet unfamiliar with the tone and tenor of this later commentary. The truths enshrined in this will more speedily and effectively enable the seeker to attain the object of his quest." I continued to be closely associated with him until that great encounter of Sheikh Tabasi. When informed of that event, the Bab directed all his companions to hasten to that spot and extend every assistance in their power to Qudus, his heroic and distinguished disciple. Addressing me one day, he said, "But for my incarceration in the Jabal-i-Shadid, the fortress of Shirik, it would have been incumbent upon me to lend my personal assistance to my beloved Qudus. Participation in that struggle is not enjoined upon you. You should proceed to Karbala, and should abide in that holy city, inasmuch as you are destined to behold with your own eyes the beauteous countenance of the promised Hussein. As you gaze upon that radiant face, do also remember me. Convey to him the expression of my loving devotion." He again emphatically added these words, "Verily I say, I have entrusted you with a great mission. Beware lest your heart grow faint, lest you forget the glory with which I have invested you." Soon after, I journeyed to Karbala and lived, as bidden, in that holy city. Fearing that my prolonged stay in that center of pilgrimage might excite suspicion, I decided to marry. I started to earn my livelihood as a scribe. What afflictions befell me at the hands of the Sheikhis, those who profess to be the followers of Sheikh Ahmad and yet fail to recognize the Bab. Mindful of the counsels of that beloved youth, I patiently submitted to the indignities inflicted upon me. For 2 years I lived in that city. Meanwhile that holy youth was released from his earthly prison, and through his martyrdom was delivered from the atrocious cruelties that had beset the closing years of his life. 16 lunar months, less 20 and 2 days, had elapsed since the day of the martyrdom of the Bab, when on the day of Arafi, that is the 9th day of the month of Jil Hijri, in the year AH 1267, that is the 5th of October AD 1851, while I was passing by the gate of the inner courtyard of the shrine of the Imam Hussein, my eyes, for the first time, fell upon Baha'u'llah. What shall I recount regarding the countenance which I beheld? The beauty of that face, those exquisite features which no pen or brush dare describe, his penetrating glance, his kindly face, the majesty of his bearing, the sweetness of his smile, the luxuriance of his jet-black flowing locks, left an indelible impression upon my soul. I was then an old man, bowed with age. How lovingly he advanced towards me. He took me by the hand, and in a tone which at once betrayed power and beauty, addressed me in these words: "This very day I have purposed to make you known as a Babi throughout Karbala." Still holding my hand in his, he continued to converse with me. He walked with me all along the market street, and in the end he said, "Praise be to God that you have remained in Karbala, and have beheld with your own eyes the countenance of the promised Hussein." I recalled instantly the promise which had been given me by the Bab. His words, which I had regarded as referring to a remote future, I had not shared with anyone. These words of Baha'u'llah moved me to the depths of my being. I felt impelled to proclaim to a heedless people at that very moment and with all my soul and power the advent of the promised Hussein. He bade me, however, repress my feelings and conceal my emotions. Not yet, he breathed into my ears. The appointed hour is approaching. It has not yet struck. Rest assured and be patient. From that moment, all my sorrows vanished. My soul was flooded with joy. In those days, I was so poor that most of the time I hungered for food. I felt so rich, however, that all the treasures of the earth melted away into nothingness when compared with that which I already possessed. Such is the grace of God, to whom He will, He giveth it. He verily is of immense bounty. I now return, after this digression, to my theme. I have been referring to the eagerness with which Sayyid Kazim had determined to rend asunder those veils which intervened between the people of his day and the recognition of the promised manifestation. In the introductory pages of his works, entitled Sha'i Qasidi and Sha'i Qutbi, he, in veiled language, alludes to the blessed name of Baha'u'llah. In a booklet, the last he wrote, he explicitly mentions the name of the Bab by his reference to the term Zikrullah-i-Azam. In it he writes, addressing this noble Zikr, Zikr means mention or remembrance, addressing this noble Zikr, this mighty voice of God, I say, I am apprehensive of the people, lest they harm you. I am apprehensive of my own self, lest I too may hurt you. I fear you. I tremble at your authority. I dread the age in which you live. Were I to treasure you as the apple of my eye until the day of resurrection, I would not sufficiently have proved my devotion to you. How grievously Sayyid Kazim suffered at the hands of the people of wickedness. What harm that villainous generation inflicted upon him. For years he suffered silently and endured with heroic patience all the indignities, the calumnies, the denunciations that were heaped upon him. He was destined, however, to witness, during the last years of his life, how the avenging hand of God destroyed with utter destruction those that opposed, vilified and plotted against him. In those days the followers of Sayyid Ibrahim, that notorious enemy of Sayyid Kazim, banded themselves together for the purpose of stirring up sedition and mischief and endangering the life of their formidable adversary. By every means at their disposal, they sought to poison the minds of his admirers and friends, to undermine his authority and to discredit his name. No voice was raised in protest against the agitation that was being sedulously prepared by that ungodly and treacherous people, each of whom professed to be the exponent of true learning and the repository of the mysteries of the faith of God. No one sought to warn or awaken them. They gathered such force and kindled such strife that they succeeded in evicting from Karbala in a disgraceful manner the representative official of the Ottoman government and appropriated for their own sordid aims whatever revenues accrued to him. Their menacing attitude aroused the central government at Constantinople, which dispatched a military official to the scene of agitation with full instructions to quench the fires of mischief. With the force at his command, that official besieged that city and dispatched a communication to Sayyid Kazim in which he entreated him to pacify the minds of the excited populace. He appealed to him to counsel moderation to its inhabitants, to induce them to relax their stubbornness and to surrender voluntarily to his rule. Were they to heed his counsels, he promised that he would undertake to ensure their safety and protection, would proclaim a general amnesty, and would strive to promote their welfare. If they refused, however, to submit, he warned them that their lives would be in danger, that a great calamity would surely befall them. Upon the receipt of this formal communication, Sayyid Kazim summoned to his presence the chief instigators of the movement, and with the utmost wisdom and affection exhorted them to cease their agitation and surrender their arms. He spoke with such persuasive eloquence, such sincerity and detachment, that their hearts were softened and their resistance was subdued. They solemnly undertook to throw open the next morning the gates of the citadel, and to present themselves in the company of Sayyid Kazim to the officer in command of the besieging forces. It was agreed that the Sayyid would intervene in their behalf and secure for them whatever would ensure their tranquility and welfare. No sooner had they left the presence of the Sayyid than the ulamas, the chief instigators of the rebellion, unanimously arose to frustrate this plan. Fully aware that such intervention on the part of the Sayyid, who had already excited their envy, would serve to enhance his prestige and consolidate his authority, they determined to persuade a number among the foolish and excitable elements of the population to sally forth at night and attack the forces of the enemy. They assured them of victory on the strength of a dream in which one of their members had seen Abbas, the brother of the Imam Hussein, who had charged him to incite his followers to wage holy war against the besiegers, and had given him the promise of ultimate success. Deluded by this vain promise, they rejected the advice tendered by that wise and judicious counselor, and arose to execute the designs of their foolish leaders. Sayyid Kazim, who was well aware of the evil influence that actuated that revolt, addressed a detailed and faithful report on the situation to the Turkish commander, who again wrote to Sayyid Kazim and reiterated his appeal for a peaceful settlement of the issue. He, moreover, declared that at a given time he would force the gates of the citadel and would regard the home of the Sayyid as the only place of refuge for a defeated enemy. This declaration the Sayyid caused to be spread throughout the city. It served only to excite the derision and contempt of the population. When informed of the reception accorded that declaration, the Sayyid remarked from the Quran 1181, "Verily, that with which they are threatened is for the morning. Is not the morning near?" At daybreak, the appointed hour, the forces of the enemy bombarded the ramparts of the citadel, demolished its walls, entered the city, and pillaged and massacred a considerable number of its population. Many fled in consternation to the courtyard of the shrine of the Imam Hussein. Others sought refuge in the sanctuary of Abbas. Those who loved and honored Sayyid Kazim betook themselves to his home. So great was the crowd that hastened to the shelter of his residence that it was found necessary to appropriate a number of the adjoining houses in order to accommodate the multitude of refugees who pressed at its doors. So vast and excited was the concourse that thronged his house that when once the tumult had subsided, it was ascertained that no less than 22 persons had been trampled to death. What consternation seized the residents and visitors of that holy city! With what severity did the victors treat their terrified enemy! With what audacity they ignored those sacred rights and prerogatives with which the piety of countless Muslim pilgrims had invested the holy sites of Karbala! They refused to recognize alike the shrine of the Imam Hussein and the sacred mausoleum of Abbas as inviolable sanctuaries for the thousands who fled before the avenging wrath of an alien people. The hallowed precincts of both these shrines ran with the blood of the victims. One place, and only one, could assert its right of sanctuary to the innocent and the faithful among the population. That place was the residence of Sayyid Kazim. His house, with its dependencies, was regarded as being endowed with such sanctity as even the most hallowed shrine of Shia Islam had failed to retain. That strange manifestation of the avenging wrath of God was an object lesson to those who were inclined to belittle the station of that holy man. That memorable event happened on the 8th of Dhul Hijri in the year AH 1258, the 12th of January AD 1843. It is admittedly evident that in every age and dispensation, those whose mission it is either to proclaim the truth or to prepare the way for its acceptance have invariably been opposed by a number of powerful adversaries who challenged their authority and attempted to pervert their teachings. These have, either by fraud or pretense, calumny or oppression, succeeded for a time in beguiling the uninformed and in misleading the feeble. Desirous of maintaining their hold over the thoughts and consciences of men, they have, so long as the faith of God remained concealed, been able to enjoy the fruits of a fleeting and precarious ascendancy. No sooner was the faith proclaimed, however, than they found to their utter dismay the effects of their dark plottings pale before the dawning light of the new day of God. Before the fierce rays of that rising orb, all their machinations and evil deeds faded into nothingness, and were soon a thing forgotten. Around Sayyid Kazim were likewise gathered a number of vain and ignoble people, who feigned devotion and attachment to his person, who professed to be devout and pious, and who claimed to be the sole repositories of the mysteries enshrined in the utterances of Sheikh Ahmad and his successor. They occupied the seats of honor in the company of the assembled disciples of Sayyid Kazim. To them he addressed his disclosure, and towards them he showed marked consideration and courtesy. And yet he often, in covert and subtle phrases, alluded to their blindness, their vainglory, and their utter inaptitude for the apprehension of the mysteries of the divine utterance. Among his allusions were the following: "None can comprehend my language except him who is begotten of me." Oftentimes he quoted this saying, "I am spellbound by the vision, I am mute with wonder, and behold the world bereft of the power of hearing. I am powerless to divulge the mystery, and find the people incapable of bearing its weight." On another occasion he remarked, "Many are those who claim to have attained union with the Beloved, and yet that Beloved refuses to acknowledge their claim. By the tears which he sheds for his loved one, can the true lover be distinguished from the false?" Many a time he observed, "He who is destined to be made manifest after me is a pure lineage, of illustrious descent, of the seed of Fatimeh. He is of medium height and is free from bodily deficiency." I have heard Sheikh Abu Turab, a footnote says, one of the leading disciples of Sayyid Kazim, he married the sister of Mullah Hussein, he died while in prison in Tehran. I have heard Sheikh Abu Turab recount the following: "I, together with a number of the disciples of Sayyid Kazim, regarded the allusion to these deficiencies, from which the Sayyid declared the promised one to be free, as specifically directed towards 3 individuals among our fellow disciples. We even designated them by such appellations as indicated their bodily defects. One of them was Haji Mirza Karim Khan." A footnote says, "The Bab wrote to Haji Muhammad Karim Khan and invited him to acknowledge his authority. This the latter not only entirely refused to do, but further wrote a treatise against the Bab and his doctrines." Page 910. At least 2 such treatises were written by Haji Muhammad Karim Khan. One of them was composed at a later date than this, probably after the Bab's death, at the special request of Naziruddin Shah. Of these 2, one has been printed and is called The Crushing Falsehood, Isakul Batil, footnote 1, page 910, Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society, 1889, Article 12. One of them was Haji Mirza Karim Khan, son of Ibrahim Khan-i Qajar-i Kirmani, who was both one-eyed and sparsely bearded. Another was Mirza Hassan-i Gauhar, an exceptionally corpulent man. The third was Mirza Muhit-i Shair-i Kirmani, who was extraordinarily lean and tall. We felt convinced that these were none other than those to whom the Sayyid constantly alluded as those vain and faithless people who would eventually reveal their real selves and betray their ingratitude and folly. As to Haji Mirza Karim Khan, who for years sat at the feet of Sayyid Kazim and acquired from him all his so-called learning, in the end he obtained leave from his master to settle in Kirman, and there engage in the promotion of the interests of Islam and the dissemination of those traditions that clustered round the sacred memory of the Imams of the faith. I was present in the library of Sayyid Kazim when one day an attendant of Haji Mirza Karim Khan arrived, holding a book in his hand, which he presented to the Cid on behalf of his master, requesting him to peruse it and to signify in his own handwriting his approval of its contents. The Cid read portions of that book and returned it to the attendant with the message, "Tell your master that he, better than anyone else, can estimate the value of his own book." The attendant had retired when the Cid, with sorrowful voice, remarked, "Accursed be he! For years he has been associated with me, and now that he intends to depart, his one aim, after so many years of study and companionship, is to diffuse through his book such heretical and atheistic doctrines as he now wishes me to endorse. He has covenanted with a number of self-seeking hypocrites with the view of establishing himself in Kirman, and in order to assume after my departure from this world the reins of undisputed leadership. How grievously he erred in his judgment, for the breeze of divine revelation, wafted from the dayspring of guidance, will assuredly quench his light and destroy his influence. The tree of his endeavor will eventually yield naught but the fruit of bitter disillusion and gnawing remorse. Verily I say, you shall behold this with your own eyes. My prayer for you is that you may be protected from the mischievous influence which he, the Antichrist of the promised revelation, will in future exercise." He bade me conceal his prediction until the day of resurrection, the day when the hand of omnipotence will have disclosed the secrets which are now hidden within the breasts of men. On that day, he exhorted me, arise with unswerving purpose and determination for the triumph of the faith of God. Publish far and wide all that you have heard and witnessed. This same Sheikh Abu Turab, who in the early days of the dispensation proclaimed by the Bab thought it wiser and better not to identify himself with his cause, cherished in his heart the fondest love for the revealed manifestation, and in his faith remained firm and immovable as the rock. Eventually that smouldering fire blazed forth in his soul, and was responsible for such behavior on his part as to cause him to suffer imprisonment in Tehran, in the same dungeon within which Baha'u'llah was confined. He remained steadfast to the very end, and crowned a life of loving sacrifice with the glory of martyrdom. And as the days of Sayyid Kazim drew to a close, he, whenever he met his disciples, whether in private converse or public discourse, exhorted them, saying, "O my beloved companions, beware, beware, lest after me the world's fleeting vanities beguile you. Beware lest you wax haughty and forgetful of God. It is incumbent upon you to renounce all comfort, all earthly possessions and kindred, in your quest of him who is the desire of your hearts and of mine. Scatter far and wide, detach yourselves from all earthly things, and humbly and prayerfully beseech your Lord to sustain and guide you. Never relax in your determination to seek and find him who is concealed behind the veils of glory. Persevere till the time when he who is your true guide and master will graciously aid you and enable you to recognize him. Be firm till the day when he will choose you as the companions and the heroic supporters of the promised Qaim. Well is it with every one of you who will quaff the cup of martyrdom in his path. Those of you whom God in his wisdom will preserve and keep to witness the setting of the star of divine guidance, that harbinger of the sun of divine revelation, must needs be patient, must remain assured and steadfast. Such ones amongst you must neither falter nor feel dismayed, for soon after the first trumpet blast, which is to smite the earth with extermination and death, there shall be sounded again yet another call, at which all things shall be quickened and revived. Then will the meaning of these sacred verses be revealed. And there was a blast on the trumpet, and all who are in the heavens and all who are in the earth expired, save those whom God permitted to live. Then was there sounded another blast, and lo, arising they gazed around them, and the earth shone with the light of her Lord, and the book was set, and the prophets were brought up, and the witnesses, and judgment was given between them with equity, and none was wronged. Quran 39:68. Verily I say, after the Qayyum will be made manifest. The footnote says references to the Bab and to Baha'u'llah respectively. For when the star of the former has set, the sun of the beauty of Hussein will arise and illuminate the whole world. Then will be unfolded in all its glory the mystery and the secret spoken of by Sheikh Ahmad, who has said, the mystery of this cause must needs be made manifest, and the secret of this message must needs be divulged. To have attained unto the day of days is to have attained unto the crowning glory of past generations, and one goodly deed performed in that age is equal to the pious worship of countless ages. How often has that venerable soul, Sheikh Ahmad, recited those verses of the Quran already referred to? What stress he laid upon their significance as foreshadowing the advent of those twin revelations which are to follow each other in rapid succession, and each of which is destined to suffuse the world with all its glory. How many times did he exclaim, well is it with him who will recognize their significance and behold their splendor. How often, addressing me, did he remark, neither of us shall live to gaze upon their effulgent glory, but many of the faithful among your disciples shall witness the day which we, alas, can never hope to behold. Oh, my beloved companions, how great, how very great is this cause! How exalted the station to which I summon you! How great the mission for which I have trained and prepared you! Gird up the loins of endeavor and fix your gaze upon his promise. I pray to God graciously to assist you to weather the storms of tests and trials which must needs beset you, to enable you to emerge unscathed and triumphant from their midst, and to lead you to your high destiny. Every year, in the month of Zil Qa'dah, the Seyyid would proceed from Karbala to Qazimain in order to visit the shrines of the Imams. The footnote says, the tombs of the two Qazims, the 7th Imam Musa Qazim and the 9th Imam Muhammad Taqi, about 3 miles north of Baghdad. Around them has grown up a considerable town, inhabited chiefly by Persians, known as Qazimain. He would return to Karbala in time to visit, on the day of Arafi, the shrine of the Imam Hussein. In that year, the last year of his life, he, faithful to his custom, departed from Karbala in the first days of the month of Zil Qa'dah, in the year AH 1259, the 23rd of November to the 23rd of December, AD 1843, accompanied by a number of his companions and friends. On the 4th day of that month he arrived at the Masjid-i-Baratha, situated on the highway between Baghdad and Qazimain, in time to offer up his noonday prayer. He bade the muazzin summon the faithful to gather and pray. Standing beneath the shade of a palm which faced the masjid, he joined the congregation and had just concluded his devotions when an Arab suddenly appeared, approached the Seyyid and embraced him. 3 days ago, he said, I was shepherding my flock in this adjoining pasture when sleep suddenly fell upon me. In my dream I saw Muhammad, the apostle of God, who addressed me in these words, Give ear, O shepherd, to my words, and treasure them within your heart, for these words of mine are the trust of God which I commit to your keeping. If you be faithful to them, great will be your reward. If you neglect them, grievous retribution will befall you. Hear me. This is the trust with which I charge you. Stay within the precincts of the Masjid-i-Baratha. On the 3rd day after this dream, a scion of my house, Seyyid Qazim by name, will, accompanied by his friends and companions, alight at the hour of noon, beneath the shadow of the palm in the vicinity of the masjid. There he will offer his prayer. As soon as your eyes fall upon him, seek his presence and convey to him my loving greetings. Tell him, from me, rejoice, for the hour of your departure is at hand. When you shall have performed your visits in Qazimain and shall have returned to Karbala, there 3 days after your return, on the day of Arifi, the 31st of December, AD 1843, you will wing your flight to me. Soon after shall he who is the truth be made manifest. Then shall the world be illuminated by the light of his face. A smile wreathed the countenance of Sayyid Kazim upon the completion of the description of the dream related by that shepherd. He said, "Of the truth of the dream which you have dreamt there is no doubt." His companions were sorely grieved. Turning to them, he said, "Is not your love for me for the sake of that true one whose advent we all await? Would you not wish me to die, that the promised one may be revealed?" This episode, in its entirety, has been related to me by no less than 10 persons, all of whom were present on that occasion, and who testified to its accuracy. And yet many of those who witnessed with their own eyes such marvelous signs have rejected the truth and repudiated his message. This strange event was noised abroad. It brought sadness to the hearts of the true lovers of Sayyid Kazim. To these he, with infinite tenderness and joy, addressed words of cheer and comfort. He calmed their troubled hearts, fortified their faith, and inflamed their zeal. With dignity and calm he completed his pilgrimage and returned to Karbala. The very day of his arrival he fell ill and was confined to bed. His enemies spread the rumor that he had been poisoned by the governor of Baghdad. This was sheer calumny and downright falsehood, inasmuch as the governor himself had placed his unqualified confidence in Sayyid Kazim and had always regarded him as a highly talented leader endowed with keen perception and possessed of irreproachable character. On the day of Arifeh, in the year AH 1259, AD 1843, at the ripe age of 60, Sayyid Kazim, in accordance with the vision of that lowly shepherd, bade farewell to this world, leaving behind him a band of earnest and devoted disciples who, purged of all worldly desire, set out in quest of their promised beloved. His sacred remains were interred within the precincts of the shrine of the Imam Hussein. His passing raised a tumult in Karbala, similar to the agitation that seized its people in the preceding year. A footnote says, "During the lifetime of Sayyid Kazim, the doctrine of the Sheikhis spread over all Persia so well that in the province of Iraq alone there were more than 100,000 murids." Journal Asiatique, 1866, volume 7, page 463. His passing raised a tumult in Karbala similar to the agitation that seized its people the preceding year on the eve of the day of Arifeh, when the victorious enemy forced the gates of the citadel and massacred a considerable number of its besieged inhabitants. A year before, on that day, his house had been the one haven of peace and security for the bereaved and homeless, whereas now it had become a house of sorrow, where those whom he had befriended and succored bewailed his passing and mourned his loss. The footnote here says, "Here ends the history of the establishment of Sheikhism, or at least of its unity, for after the death of Sayyid Kazim Rashdi, it became divided into 2 branches. One branch, under the name of Babism, flowered as foreshadowed by the strength of the movement created by Sheikh Ahmad, thus fulfilling the expectations of the 2 masters, if one may believe in their predictions. The other, under the leadership of Karim Khan-i Kaja-i Kirmani, will continue its struggles against the Shiite sect, but will always seek security in effecting the outer appearance of Ithna Asharism. If, according to Karim Khan, the Bab and his followers are infamous and impious, for the Baha'is, Karim Khan is the Antichrist or Dajjal foretold by Muhammad." A.L.M. Nicholas's Essay sur le Sheikhisme, Volume 2, page 31.